please sing along with ourselves, recorded at CUUC, hymn number 347, Gather the Spirit.
Let us be called, by bell and bird, by maple and larch, by the beat of our hearts, let us be called together in covenant. Let us be called to spiritual wholeness, to accountability, and to beloved community. Today, with the bells sounding from Gwangju Mountain Temple in Korea and the Carolina wren singing in many backyards, let us especially remember our covenant to affirm and promote the eighth principle, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions.
Good morning. Welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Congregation in White Plains, New York. Reverend Meredith Garmon is not feeling his best this morning, and he hopes to be able to rejoin us in time for his sermon. I'm Adam Kent, CUUC's music director, here at my home on what the Lenape used to refer to as Manahata, the hilly island.
Good morning. I'm Tracy Brenneman, Community UU religious educator, coming to you from my home.
Welcome to this home of liberal religion, which affirms 5 commitments: learning, freedom, justice, institution building, and hope.
Learning. Revelation is continuous. Meaning has not been finally captured. Nothing is complete, and thus nothing is exempt from criticism.
Freedom. All relations must rest on free consent. Coercions may be subtle, so the work of removing them is ongoing.
Justice. We are morally obligated to direct our effort toward the establishment of a just and loving community. Hence, the voices of prophets are indispensable.
Institution building. We cannot become whole without human institutions.
Hope. Progress is not inevitable, but it is possible.
It's the Sunday at the end of the 8th full week of spring. Daylight today is up to 14 hours, 33 minutes. The waxing crescent moon was new on Tuesday night. This is the flower moon. On the Jewish calendar, Shavuos begins at sundown tonight. Known as the Feast of Weeks, the two-day holiday marks the wheat harvest in Israel and commemorates God's gift of the Torah to the children of Israel.
And a special welcome to our visitors. If you're a first-time visitor, we invite you to introduce yourself in the chat. You'll find the order of service on our website at cuucwp.org. There you'll also find other resources to help us keep connected during this time and a donate button. For May, our Share the Plate funds support Hope Meals. We're able to take contributions via the donate button for your pledge, the plate share, and the minister's discretionary fund.
And now Board Chair Joe Majak has some news and will then lead us in lighting our chalices.
Hi, I'm Joe Majak. As the chair of the board for this congregation, I welcome you. Do you know what a grease trap is? I had no idea what it was back in October when the kitchen flooded and it triggered a sensor. That sensor launched alarms to nearby CUUC members capable of rapid response, one of which was me. The problem, a grease trap filled to capacity and then some. It's a reservoir in the floor beneath the kitchen sink, which collects grease and other fats as they wash through the drain, instead of clogging up the system. After studying 2 YouTubes, I returned to the kitchen the following day and cleaned out the grease trap. Disrupting the inches of grease resulted in an olfactory experience no living creature should be asked to endure. This week, 7 months later, we called in a plumbing professional to inspect the grease trap. He announced that the system was working as designed and was in great condition. We'll probably have his company back in 3 months or so for a clean out and continued maintenance thereafter. I have always welcomed the learning opportunities that come along with the duties of board chair, but I never expected to spend a Saturday in October vacuuming out a grease trap and having the urge to burn my clothing once the task was done. But I love a happy ending, one less problem for CUUC. And now it's time to light the chalice. On the 8th Sunday of the season, we dedicate our chalice to the 8th principle, journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. Please join with me in the chalice lighting words from William Schultz. This is the chalice of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands.
A nation coming apart at the seams. Shared reality that held a people together despite differences no longer shared. Widespread distrust of the basic institutions of society. Heretofore reliable truth rejected. That was 17th century England. The Civil War that produced the execution of King Charles I in 1649 was as much about forms of worship as it was forms of government, as much about the polity of the church as the polity of the state. After 11 years of Commonwealth, the monarchy was restored. Charles II was succeeded by James II, England's last Catholic monarch. The general anxiety about his Catholicism, combined with outrage when James prosecuted 7 bishops for seditious libel, destroyed his political authority. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 ousted James and brought the reign of William and Mary. The Toleration Act of 1689 extended toleration to various nonconformists with the Church of England, Presbyterians, Baptists, Independents, but not to Catholics or Unitarians. The law required rejection of transubstantiation and required acceptance of the Trinity. Still, Unitarian thought in both Arian and Socinian variations spread. Isaac Newton wrote that Scripture support for the doctrine of the Trinity was too corrupt to be relied upon. John Locke in 1695 published a theological work that was essentially Socinian. Thomas Emlyn, a popular and beloved Presbyterian minister in Dublin, was a closet Unitarian. For 11 years, he served his congregation and avoided controversy until one day a congregant observed that in 11 years of preaching, he'd never made any reference to the Trinity. Emlyn acknowledged his Arian Unitarian views and offered to resign. What happened will be in our next thrilling episode.
It ain't the melody. It ain't the music. There's something else that makes the tune complete. This lyric from Duke Ellington's "It Don't Mean a Thing" must have had a double meaning to the early African-American pioneers of jazz. The style relied heavily on improvisation and the individualization of a given tune. The problem with making money at it stemmed from the fact that the early copyright laws had been set up by the white ruling class to favor printed sheet music. You can copyright a melody, but not a harmonic progression or a rhythm. And as Ellington reminds us, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing.
Words of invocation from Langston Hughes. Let America be America again. I am the poor white, fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery's scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. I am the young man, full of strength and hope, tangled in that ancient endless chain of profit, power, gain, of grab the land, of grab the gold, of grab the ways of satisfying need, of work the men, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed. I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I am the worker sold to the machine. I am the Negro, servant to you all. I am the people, humble, hungry, mean, hungry yet today, despite the dream, beaten yet today. Oh, pioneers, I am the man who never got ahead, the poorest worker bartered through the years. Yet I'm the one who dreamt our basic dream in the old world while still a serf of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that even yet its mighty daring sings in every brick and stone, in every furrow turned that's made America the land it has become. Oh, I'm the man who sailed those early seas in search of what I meant to be my home. For I'm the one who left dark Ireland's shore and Poland's plain and England's grassy lea, and torn from black Africa's strand, I came to build a homeland of the free. The free? Who said the free? Not me? Surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay, for all the dreams we've dreamed and all the songs we've sung and all the hopes we've held and all the flags we've hung, the millions who have nothing for our pay except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet and yet must be, the land where every man is free, the land that's mine, the poor man's, Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain must bring back our mighty dream again. Sure, call me any ugly name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain. From those who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take back our land again, America. Oh yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we, the people, must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain, all the stretch of these great green states, and make America again. Our sung invocation. Please sing along now with Kim and Georgiana, Spirit of Truth.
Spirit of truth, that dwellest in the mountain, descend, we pray thee, to the marts of earth. Give us to hear the rustle of thy garment. Grant us to feel thy shadow near. So may we find the strength to stand face forward, courage to walk toward the dawning day.
The mission of Community Unitarian Universalist Congregation is the covenant of this congregation. Would all the members and visitors who would like to affirm it along with me? We covenant to nurture each other in our spiritual journeys, foster compassion and understanding within and beyond our community, and engage in service to transform ourselves and our world. And now, a special treat. Live from our sanctuary, Creighton Cray is going to play Michel Legrand's Brian's Song for us.
This morning, we're thinking about legacy and generations. Our story lifts up the legacy of astounding resilience, families passing knowledge and hope from one generation to the next. This story is about generations of women from the author's family who made quilts called showays, made of fabric, secrets, and stories all woven together. From slavery to freedom, through segregation, freedom marches, and the fight for literacy, the tradition they call showay has been passed down by the women in Jacqueline Woodson's family as a way to remember the past and celebrate the possibilities of the future. This is Jacqueline Woodson's showay, and you'll hear the author reading her family's story.
When Suni's great-grandma was 7, she was sold from the Virginia land to a plantation in South Carolina without her ma or pa, but with some muslin her ma had given her, and 2 needles she got from the big house, and thread dyed bright red with berries from the chokecherry tree. In South Carolina, Big Mama raised Suni's great-grandma, raised most of the slave children on that large patch of land. At night, Big Mama told the children stories she'd tell in a whisper about children growing up and getting themselves free. And the children leaned in and listened real hard. And in the daytime, when there were some few minutes for a slave to rest a bit, Big Mama taught Suni's great-grandma to sew colored thread into stars and moons and roads that slave children grew up and followed late in the night, a piece of quilt and the true moon leading them. Years passed. Big Mama moved on to the next world. And Suni's great-grandma grew up, jumped broom with a young man named Ensler. Had herself a baby girl and named that child Mathis May. Loved that baby up so, yes, she loved that baby up. And one day Mathis May would be Suni's grandma, but not for a long, long time yet. In the meantime, she learned to sew. Beautiful girl child, learned to sew. When Mathis May was 7, she got sold away. Took a star from her mama's blanket, took a little piece of the road, pressed it to her face when she wanted to remember back home, held it to her heart to feel back home, got herself a piece of muslin and some thread somewhere, and kept up her sewing. Sewed so fine she was making clothes for everyone in the big house, and slaves too. And at night she sewed stars and moons and roads, tiny patch pieces of stars and moons and roads.
Go to log cabin.
Go to log cabin.
Stay on drunkard's path.
Stay on drunkard's path.
Walk in a zigzag line.
Walk in a zigzag line.
To crossroads.
To crossroads.
Look for wild geese flying. To find North Star.
North Star.
Slaves whispered what no one was allowed to say, that Mathis know how to make a way. Came to her when they needed to talk, came to her for the stories of brave people, came to her for the patch pieces, just before they disappeared into the night. But Mathis May stayed on, grew tall and straight-boned, jumped broom with another slave. That slave was killed running off to the north side of the war, months before he got to meet his baby, a girl child who was born free that same year, 1863. History went and lost her name. Years later, Suni came. Suni's mama held her up in the moonlit night, showed her the stars, the moon, whispered into her ear, "There's a road, girl. There's a road." Loved that Suni up so, yes, she loved that Suni up. Suni and her mama stayed on the land they'd always known, picking cotton for a little pay and a piece of that ground to farm. Call that land home. Stayed on with other people, none of them slaves anymore. Hard work making a life from pink day to blue-black night. But it was a free life just the same. And when the day was finally over, wasn't hard to find a thing or two to smile about. At night they cut and sewed strange lines and odd designs. People said about Suni, that child could find some beauty in so many things. When Suni was 7, she was tall and straight-boned like her mama. Took and washed with her mama. Sewed stars on patch pieces. Sewed stars and moons and roads. Sewed fields and rivers and trees. Patched the pieces together for her mama to sell come market day. Call those quilts Trail to the North. Call the quilts Showway. Didn't much need that secret trail to the north anymore, but started living well off the money those quilts brought in. Sewed those quilts to live, sewed those quilts to remember. And though some could book read, most could not. Stars and moon and roads, picture reading was what they'd always known. Some morning, Suni looked out over the fields of cotton and dreamed of a place to call her own. Married a man named Walter Scott, who owned a bit of land in Anderson, South Carolina. Had herself a baby girl, named that girl child Georgiana. Loved that baby up so, yes, they loved that baby up. Georgiana, who grew tall and straight-boned and free, picking out words from her mama's Bible by 3, reading by oil lamplight at age 5. People say about Georgiana, she always had a book in her hand. Grew up to teach at a small school in Anderson. Had herself 2 girls at once, named them Carlene and Anne. Loved those babies up so, yes, they loved those babies up. And Carlene and Anne grew up tall and straight-boned. Turned 7 walking in a line to change the laws that kept black people and white people living separate. Anne grew up writing poems, and sometimes she made the poems into songs. Carlene stitched those songs into art that people bought to hang up on their walls. Anne had me. And Mama loved this baby up so, yes, she loved this baby up. And when I was 7, I didn't have to work in a field or walk in any freedom lines. But I still read like Georgiana and wrote like Anne. And when the words were slow in coming, I sewed stars and moons and roads into quilts and curtains and clothes, because Mama said, all the stuff that happened before you were born is your own kind of showway. There's a road, girl, my mama said. There's a road.
Please join me in prayer with these words from Reverend Meredith. Dear breath of life flowing through us, recognizing the aspiration we have to abide with reality just as it is, undistorted by what we want more of or what we want less of. Recognizing the compassion we have, our desire that suffering, wherever it may arise, be eased. Recognizing the great wisdom of our bodies, circulating blood, taking in oxygen and releasing our excess carbon dioxide, healing our scratches and bruises and sores, keeping us balanced and alive every day without need of our conscious attention. We breathe in all the suffering of the world and breathe out the salve of care. We are bodies miraculously born into this world. Our infant brains had no idea how to be born, but our little bodies and our mother's bodies together knew how to do it. We forget what a sacred miracle our life is, but our bodies do not forget. Our bodies never fail us. They wear out or will, they break down, but that is not failing us. That is reliably carrying us through our cycle from birth to death, precisely as they should. Our bodies never fail us. These amazing bodies have the capacity to breathe in suffering and transform it. Inhaling, we say yes to another moment of life with all its pain, sorrow, and loss. Exhaling, we release all of this. Compassion doesn't require major effort. We only have to allow it. The pain and difficulty in our lives and the pain and difficulty of others is a gateway to the path of love. Breathing in the ongoing suffering of this pandemic, breathing out recovery, recuperation, healing. Breathing in the unrest and violence in Gaza and Israel, breathing out peace. Breathing in anger and hate, breathing out concern and respect, dignity and care. Breathing in the death at the Kabul, Afghanistan girls' school, where a bomb on Saturday, May 8th killed at least 85, and at a school shooting in Kazan, Russia on Tuesday, where 7 children were killed. Breathing out safety and protection for all students seeking to learn. Breathing in the plight of 300,000 Cambodians in zones where they are forbidden to leave their home to get food, while NGOs are barred from entering to distribute aid. Breathing out comfort and sustenance. Breathing in the violence, corruption, and economic calamity in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. Breathing out mercy, conciliation, courage, and trust. Breathing in all of the pollution of air and ocean. Breathing out cleansing and restoration. Breathing in all that is broken and hurt. Breathing out healing, health, and wholeness. We ask of ourselves the mindful intention to delight in what is good, to confront what is cruel, and to heal what is broken. For all that has been shared, and for all we carry in our hearts, we observe a moment of silence.
Calling all you hungry hearts, everywhere through endless time. You who wander, you who thirst, I offer you this heart of mine. Calling all you hungry spirits, all the lost and the left behind. All I can, I'll share with you, your joy and your sorrow, I make it mine.
Duke Ellington longed to emulate George Gershwin and transition from writing popular jazz standards to gaining acceptance as a classical composer of symphonic music and opera. Those worlds were closed to Ellington, however, by the predominantly white male European bureaucracy of the mid-20th century concert hall. We can savor the classical grace and restraint of his melodies in a tune like Solitude, even as we reflect on the creative outlets denied to him during his lifetime.
Our once-a-month eco-spiritual practice is brought to you by CUUC's Environmental Practices Social Justice Team. Eco-spiritual practice is oriented toward developing spirituality through our connection with our planet home and our responsibility to care for it. This month's eco-spiritual practice is titled Cogs in the Machine. Every aspect of our lives, the food we eat, the cars we drive, the places we work, even the toilets we flush, has an impact on the environment, and precious little is within any appreciable individual control. Despite the risk of disengagement on the part of some, the first step toward recovering from our collective addiction to consumptive and polluting culture is recognition of the extent of our powerlessness. We need to be aware of systems that are beyond our control. To change them, we may need to change laws, but more importantly, we need to change the culture as a whole. Consider how the culture shifted around cigarettes. Smoking is no longer the mark of glamour or status it once was. Attitudes shifted. Facing up to the way things really are is a critical first step toward making the deep changes our society so desperately needs. The post at CUC Matters offers 2 individual practices to try, as well as a group ritual and questions for conversation with your eco-spiritual group. The link is in your eCommunitarian.
I invite you now to sing along with singers and pianist of Eno River Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Durham, North Carolina, our hymn number 368, Now Let Us Sing. If you sing low, sing with Lelena on the right-hand side, and if you sing high, sing with Jocelyn on your left.
Now let us sing to the power of the faith. Sing. Now let us sing to the power of the faith. Lift up your voice, let us pray. Let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing to the power of the faith. Now let us sing to the power of the faith. Lift up your voice, let us pray. Sing to the power of the hope within. Now let us sing to the power of the love. Now let us sing to the power of the love. Lift up your voice, let us pray. Now let us sing to the power of the love within. Now let us sing to the power of the joy. Now let us sing to the power of the joy. Lift up your voice, let us pray. Now let us sing to the power of the joy within.
I am grateful almost to the point of tears for the smooth and caring compassion that Tracy and Adam were able to bring to my temporary disability. I am subject to occasional bouts of vertigo, and it comes in waves, and I think I'm ready to deliver for you today a message that I really am very interested and anxious to share with you. And it connects to Shavuot, which the Jewish holiday that begins at sundown today. It marks the end of a 7-week period called the Omer, or counting of the Omer, which began at Passover. First day of Passover commemorates the escape from Egypt. Last day of Passover, a week later, commemorates the crossing of the Red Sea. And today, or starting at sundown today, Shavuot commemorates the receiving of the Torah from God on Mount Sinai. On this Shavuot, we look at repairing, and we draw on the Jewish concept of tikkun olam, to repair the world. In Jewish social thought, tikkun olam has come to mean we share a partnership with God. to improve the world and help others. Torah, consisting of the 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, has enslavement at the center of the story. The Jewish people were enslaved in Egypt and they became free, and that's something for which to be grateful. One might be grateful for that in the sort of way that one is grateful for antibiotics. We used to be subject to a lot of diseases that now we aren't, thank goodness. But the Torah makes clear that this episode of enslavement isn't just a horrible thing in the past, which we can be grateful is over. It's an ongoing instruction in how to live now. For instance, because of the past experience in Egypt, there's a requirement of care for immigrants. Leviticus 19 commands, when an alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppress the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. And also, based on that experience in Egypt, there's an injunction about slavery. Deuteronomy 15 commands, if a member of your community, whether a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and works for you 6 years, in the 7th year you shall set that person free. And when you send him out from you, a free person, you shall not send him out empty-handed. Provide liberally out of your flock, your threshing floor, your winepress, thus giving to him some of the bounty with which the Lord your God has blessed you. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. For this reason, I lay this command upon you today. It's a commandment in the Bible for reparations. This is the section of Deuteronomy known as the Deuteronomic Code. It's presented as sermons by Moses. Scholars say it was probably composed around the time of King Josiah, near the end of the 7th century BCE, so about 2,700 years ago. It is essentially the work not of a jurist or a statesman, but of a prophet, which is to say its primary impetus is to call out and correct injustice. The Deuteronomic Code provides protections for women, children, widows, foreigners, and the poor. It methodically provides legal compensation for those victimized by the inequities and brutalities that may otherwise inhere in a social system. Healing is our theme for May. Healing and wholeness come from the same root. In law, a tort remedy's purpose is to make an injured party whole. That's the legal term, make whole. Make whole, heal, repair the injury, the wound. The Deuteronomic Code from 2,700 years ago was about making whole the victims of that society's inequities and brutalities. The wholeness sought was not just for the victim, but for the society. If I do something that hurts you, there is not one injury, but two. It hurts you, and it also rends our relationship. And there's a need for repair at both those levels. I, the perpetrator, also need to heal from the wound it does to me to know that I've done harm. And from the wound it does me that I've done harm, even if I don't know it. If I go blundering about, oblivious to the damage I'm causing, that damage nevertheless cuts me off from possibilities of flourishing relationships, from the fullness for which human life yearns. It constricts me, even if I'm not aware of it. It constricts me in ways of which I might not be consciously aware. The principle applies to nations as well as to people. When, in the years after World War II, Germany considered reparations for the Jewish people, at first only 29% of West Germans believed that Jews were owed restitution from the German people. 40% thought that only people who really committed something were responsible and should pay. 21% thought that the Jews themselves were partly responsible for what had happened. Over the next years, Germany's intentional process of reckoning with itself shifted those numbers, and Germany ultimately paid to Israel more than $7 billion in today's dollars. On top of that, Germany paid individual reparations claims. By 1961, reparations money had paid for 2/3 of the Israeli merchant fleet, and reparations money funded about 1/3 of the total investment in Israel's electrical system, which tripled its capacity, and nearly half the total investment in railways. Nothing, of course, could make up for the Nazi murders. But reparations did launch Germany's reckoning with itself, and perhaps provided a roadmap for how a great civilization might make itself worthy of the name. Germany didn't just repair Israel. Germany repaired Germany. It took a little longer after World War II for the US to reckon with Japanese internment camps. But in 1988, Congress authorized payments of $20,000 in reparations to most living internees. Sam and Sumi Kawidi, longtime vibrant members, well-loved of this congregation, both of whom died this year, were active in the campaign to make that happen. Was it enough? Probably not, but it was significant repair of those harmed and of the nation's wounds that it recognized, at least it had, in fact, inflicted upon itself. The possibility of repairing damage done by centuries of white supremacy is alive today in ways that it has not been for 156 years, not since Lincoln's assassination was followed by the Andrew Johnson administration, which overturned Special Field Order number 15, also known as General Sherman's 40 acres and a mule plan. Of course, we have questions. How would it work? Should the money go to individuals or into community investments and programs? How do we trace lineage? Are we talking about Black people or all people of color or indigenous peoples? Would reparations bankrupt the federal government? Or the questions that sprang to David Brooks's mind. What about the recent African immigrants? What about poor whites who have nothing of what you would call privilege? Do we pay Oprah and LeBron? I don't know the answer to those questions. I don't think we need to know the answer right now. All we need to know right now is that these questions are not unanswerable. There are various proposals for how to answer them. Put all proposals on the table and let's work out something. We might start with Boris Bidker's fairly modest proposal that we offer reparations for official school segregation. He wrote, a program to compensate children who were required to go to segregated schools would not raise any conceptual difficulties in identifying the beneficiaries. Entitlement would depend exclusively on the fact the student was assigned to a Black school, regardless of his actual racial origin. And as Jonathan Rauch adds, they are easy to identify. Many of them are very much alive. It cannot be seriously disputed that they were wronged, not only educationally, but morally, by being forced into separate and hardly equal schools. And moreover, the perpetrator of the injustice is not a race, a society, or a slave owner long dead. The perpetrator, like the victims, is identifiable and very much alive. Government. That would be at least a start, clear and doable. The reparations conversation needs to open up and continue. It was significantly revived by a long article in Atlantic by Ta-Nehisi Coates in 2014. Coates concluded, and so we must imagine a new country. Reparations, by which I mean the full acceptance of our collective biography and its consequences, is the price we must pay to see ourselves squarely. What I'm talking about is more than recompense for past injustices, more than a handout, a payoff, hush money, or a reluctant bribe. What I'm talking about is a national reckoning that would lead to spiritual renewal. Adam?
Thank you, Reverend Meredith. It took a genius from Texarkana named Scott Joplin to put a syncopated lilt to popular marching rhythms, giving birth to that quintessentially American musical style known as ragtime. For all the pleasure his work has given audiences the world over, Joplin died frustrated and disillusioned over his inability to get his opera Treemonisha produced, a reparation to his legacy that would have to wait nearly 60 years after his untimely death in 1917.
Your journey group packet for May on our theme healing includes a number of exercises to try, including this one. Exercise number 4, wrestle with the call of reparations. Does racial healing require reparations? Is it unrealistic, or both? Whatever your opinion, should we not at least make space for the discussion? Doesn't refusing that space drive us farther from healing? The reparations debate challenges us with hard questions. What does apology without accountability mean? How can personal reconciliation occur without structural repair? How much of our comfort are we willing to sacrifice to heal others' pain? Are you willing to look honestly at the casualties of your comfort and success? Can we disagree about the efficacy of reparations and still consider each other allies? The exercise invites you to explore the diverse articles below, not simply with the question of what's my opinion, but also where is my resistance coming from? What scares me about this topic? And how is the conversation itself trying to help me heal? Come to your group ready to share what the below articles taught you about yourself. And what follows then is links to 13 articles. 10 of them are from 2019 or 2020. Many of them are 2 or 3 page newspaper columns. One of them pointed out that as of 2016, the average white household had more than 10 times the median wealth of a black household. On average, black households with a head who holds a college degree have 2/3 of the wealth of white households with a head who never finished high school. The only long-form journalism on that list is the aforementioned 2014 article by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Coates particularly focuses on housing policy in the post-war period because this is a huge part of the story behind that wealth gap. Home ownership is the greatest mass-produced opportunity for wealth accumulation in American history. And through the 1950s and 60s, blacks faced tremendous obstacles in home ownership. As Coates explains, the FHA had adopted a system of maps that rated neighborhoods according to their perceived stability. On the maps, green areas rated A indicated in-demand neighborhoods that, as one appraiser put it, lacked a single foreigner or Negro. The neighborhoods were considered excellent prospects for insurance. Neighborhoods where black people lived were rated D and were considered ineligible for FHA backing. They were colored in red. Neither the percentage of black people living there nor their social class mattered. Black people were viewed as a contagion, with banks unwilling to loan, in part because the FHA wouldn't insure the loan. Blacks seeking to buy a house turned to something called buying on contract. That's a deal where the seller keeps the deed, the buyer accrues zero equity until the final payment, and if one payment is missed, they are evicted with no equity, no deed, nothing. It's like renting, only worse, because if the water heater blows or the roof leaks, the resident has full responsibility for fixing it. So we're not talking about the injustices of the 1860s, but of the 1960s, where sellers with these on-contract deals would often charge black families 2-3 times what they paid for the house. And of the 20th century, the 21st century, banks have continued to steer black clients to subprime predatory loans. In 2010, the Justice Department filed a discrimination suit against Wells Fargo, alleging that the bank had shunted blacks into predatory loans regardless of their credit worthiness. In 2011, Bank of America agreed to pay $355 million to settle charges of discrimination against its countrywide unit. And the following year, Wells Fargo settled its discrimination suit for more than $175 million. But the damage had been done. In 2009, half the properties in Baltimore whose owners had been granted loans by Wells Fargo between 2005 and 2008 were vacant. 71% of those properties were predominantly Black neighborhoods. Racism is not our fault, but it is our responsibility. No one alive today started the inculcation of our thought patterns, assumptions, and implicit biases with the idea of white supremacy. Yet all of us, Black or white or indigenous or of color, picked up that influence. That we have that is not our fault. But what we do now is our responsibility. We've been carrying around a wound our whole lives, a color line cutting through our hearts. Those of us with relatively more privilege may crouch within that privilege and try not to think about our wound. We can be forgiven for trying not to think about it. Mindfulness-based pain management programs now in some hospitals coach patients with pain not to try to distract themselves, but to actually bring attention to the pain. Really focus on it, observe it, get to know it. The result is that less drugging ourselves to mask the pain is necessary. Here, we have a way to actually heal, to take real steps toward repairing. That prospect is the most inspiring, hopeful, uplifting message I have ever received or could hope to impart. A new country, full acceptance of our collective biography and its consequences. Finally seeing ourselves squarely and able to face each other squarely. Oh man, that would be great. And it's imaginable today in ways I've never seen. A national reckoning that would lead to spiritual renewal. It has been a long and toilsome slog imposed upon the bodies of our Black, Indigenous, and people of color neighbors, but with fear and constriction, narrow minds and small hearts adopted as counterproductive defense strategies, oppressing the oppressors. The long, toilsome slog, I feel like real healing, respite, and repair is at last reachable. It makes my eyes tear and my heart soar. This generation can do some real repairing of the centuries-long wounds. For one thing, we can support H.R. 40, the bill that John Conyers has introduced year after year in Republican administrations and in Democratic administrations. It's simply a bill that calls for establishing a study commission for studying the possibility of how reparations might go. It doesn't pay out a cent to anyone, just establishes a commission to study, and yet it has never made it out of committee yet. Never made it to the floor of Congress. Some of our congregations are directly taking it upon themselves to do some repairing. In Tulsa, where the riots that squashed the African American district 100 years ago, which I will be talking about again 2 weeks from now on the anniversary of that occasion. Well, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Unitarian Universalist Church has joined with some other churches and put together a collection. An article in the UU World from 2002 says that $28,000 was collected by March 2002, and it was dispersed to survivors of that atrocity. The plan is to make distributions quarterly if donations on hand total at least $100 per survivor. Reparations are something that we can undertake to do ourselves. As Langston Hughes said, let's make America America again, the land that never was, and yet can be. May it be so. Amen.
Please join in singing our hymn number 1035, Freedom is Coming. Please join in with the Hallelujah Singers.
Freedom is coming, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, oh yes I know. Freedom is coming, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, oh yes I know. Freedom is coming, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, oh yes I know. Freedom is coming, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, oh yes I know. Freedom is coming, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, oh yes I know. Freedom is coming, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, oh yes I know. Oh yes I know, 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 oh yes I know. Justice is coming, justice is coming, justice is coming, oh yes I know. Justice is coming, justice is coming, justice is coming, oh yes I know. Oh yes I know, 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 oh yes I know. Freedom is coming, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, oh yes I know. Freedom is coming, freedom is coming, freedom is coming, oh yes I know. Oh yes I know, 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 oh yes I know.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We share our gratitude for Kim Force, who produced our media and shared the slides, Kristen Force, your Zoom host, Creighton Cray, our guest pianist, Pam Parker, who keeps us organized, and Jane Dixon, who greeted you in the chat stream. Be safe, be well. And now please join Joe Majak for our chalice extinguishing words as you extinguish your chalice at home.
Please say with me these words as we extinguish our chalices. The chalice is now extinguished, but its light lives on in the minds and hearts and souls of each one of you. Carry the flame with you as you leave this place and share it with those you know, with those you love, and most especially with those you have yet to meet.
There should be something rather than nothing.
And that we should exist at all.
That there should be others sharing with us this mysterious and beautiful thing, life.
The simple and amazing fact of existence, the invitation to constant wonder.
Dear ones, go in peace.
If you got troubles, then I've got them too. There isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. If we stick together, we can see it through. 'Cause you've got a friend in me. Yeah, you've got a friend in me. Now some of you folks might be a little friendship will never die. You're gonna see it's our destiny. You got a friend in me. You got a friend in me.
The rag that started it all, Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag.